This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I have a great acting legend here on the phone tonight. I have the wonderfully talented Bruce Glover. How you doing, Bruce?
I am wonderful and talented, can't you tell? Oh, that's right, you're not looking at me, it's a phone call. But, yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm wonderful and talented, and everyone should just send me $1. Just everyone listening, send me $1 and make me feel really wonderful and talented. So first of all, they should all look at my imdb.com site and look at my a demo of my work, because some of you may not have actually seen any of my work, but you could see clips from films like Diamonds Are Forever, the James Bond film, where two crazy guys are trying to kill Sean Connery all the way through the film. And what was innovative about that film, and it was the first time ever that two characters in a film were going to be clearly notated as being gay.
Yeah.
It was kind of very, very, very advanced kind of thing. And I didn't even know it when I got cast in the part. I hadn't read the script. I didn't audition for it. It came through a series of meetings with the producer and the producers and the director, Guy Hamilton, who unfortunately just passed away recently. Great director. And the two terrific producers, and the casting director, Billy Gordon, who was an amazing guy in my career. Billy cast me in a film that was a Stanley Kramer film called Bless the Beast and the Children. And he had brought me in for a reading after his wife was studying French, had seen me in a role in which I was doing a French accent. Actors' careers are usually, they're very different. Every actor has an entirely different career, and some people are just so gorgeous they become immediate stars. When I was at Northwestern University after my stint in the Korean War, I had developed a reputation as being a person who could coach people a bit and give people advice on their acting and that kind of thing. I remember at Northwestern they would have you comment on other actors in class, and sometimes the class would be as many as 50 people in class. And some people really hated that I was in the class because they didn't want to hear from me because I always told the truth, which I still do. I still do teach. But one of the people that came to me because of my reputation, and, you know, I was a little older than everyone else because I had been a Chicago guy, and I had no idea I was going to become an actor. Acting, for me, in my working-class neighborhood in Chicago, I was brought up during the Depression in Chicago, and my first job was at 6 years of age. I made 60 cents a week for 6 days' work delivering groceries with a little wagon. And so that was 10 cents a day. It was every day after school and Saturday mornings. And then I had enough money to go see 6 or 7 movies that afternoon, which I was an addict of. But the idea being, so I always had a job from then on as a young boy. I worked selling magazines door to door. I mowed grass. I put up windows. I worked with my grandfather, who was a Swedish carpenter, and I would work on tearing down. I dug ditches. I dug graves. I worked on a newsstand in the Loop in Chicago from the time of probably 8 years old until I was 13. Then at 14, I worked in a glass factory, ladling hot glass in the Johnson's Glass Factory in Chicago. And strangely enough, I'm not complaining about this. I am really pleased in a way that I had that kind of background, because being a working class dude, that's the way I think of life. I think of life as work to be done and enjoying doing it the best you can. And every piece of work that I've ever done, I almost always have enjoyed it. But the idea of becoming an actor was ridiculous. The two things that was going to get me out of the working class was I'm a natural artist, and I can't help but turn it that way. I guess at the age of 3, I remember in Chicago, cold winters, if you had to urinate, you would have to go upstairs. I mean, we had an apartment upstairs in a house, and you would have to go up the stairs, then take off all of your clothes, and then you would use the urinal, and then you would have to reclothe yourself and go outside again. And it was, to me, that was like tedious. And one day I'd seen a grown man pee on the side of the house, and I thought, maybe I should try that instead of going all the way upstairs. So I did, and it was really faster than going all the way upstairs. And then somehow later that day, I found the family encyclopedia. I like to say it was the Bible, but I'd be lying. It was the family encyclopedia. And I drew up a drawing of a house with eyes, and I guess there were feet, and it had kind of a pipe-like penis poking out, and it was peeing. And I drew that, and I was like 3, so there was a natural instinct to celebrate a great event in a 3-year-old's life. So the art instinct was always there, and even in grammar school, people were wanting drawings that I did, and then the other thing was I was an athlete, so I was selling paintings even when I was in high school, for very little money. But the other thing for me was I was a terrific athlete, and my big sport was football. I did wrestle also on a wrestling team, and also which had a certain theatricality to it, but a good athlete. And I was on an all-city championship team in Chicago in 1949. We were all-city champs. I mean, we won all the public league, and then we beat the Catholic League champs, and we were there. I had football scholarships to a couple colleges, but it turned out there was something in a couple grades that I'd gotten in high school, and it took a long time for me to figure out what it was. There was a certain thing that I found out many years later was a special kind of brain that I had. And I guess the first indication I had of it was when I was like, 5 years old or so, and I had a teacher was supposedly teaching writing, and they had these little illustrated books with pictures, and then there were words written on the side, but I didn't bother learning the words. I just would see the picture and then know that, remember what the other people who were reading this dialogue did. So I didn't learn to read. I just memorized the words. And the teacher discovered that. And I got held back, and because I couldn't read, because I got flunked in my first grade. I was flunked. And they made me take another semester to learn how to read. And so somebody decided to have me tested, and they never told me what my score was on the test, but a few years later, a teacher was taking us into... Now, a lot of the stuff that I'm telling and talking about now is a very unique kind of journey, but each one of you listening has your own unique journey to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was, I guess, about sixth or seventh grade. A teacher took our class into the school library, and she pointed at wall 1, 2, and 3. She said, all of the class can get books from wall 1, 2, and 3, and Bruce and Irene, or whatever the girl's name was, can also go to wall 4. And wall 4 was the college level and adult books. And I suddenly realized, wait a minute, all these years I thought I was dumber than everyone else. No, I'm smarter.
Yeah.
But there still was a kind of strange brain. And it took a long time later. So anyway, I was playing football, and I was offered these football scholarships, but there were some grade problems in one of the schools that offered a scholarship. It was Colorado College. They had a good art school, and I was interested in going there. And but they said you have to go to another college to prove you can do college-level work. And I thought, okay. And I went to a junior college in Chicago, Wright Junior College, and I played football there for 2 seasons. I was all pro, all conference in both years. I was a running back and a defensive end. Football was a bit different in those days. You didn't have to be as gigantic. There weren't the giants that are there. Anyway, but somewhere along the line, a buddy of mine that I used to do art projects with and worked out with weights with said, Bruce, you got a good build on you. That's the way we used to talk in Chicago. If you were a tough guy, you talk like that. You had to talk like that if you were a tough guy. If you weren't a tough guy, you were a sissy. So being an actor was like saying you were going to be a sissy, you know. But so he said, you ought to go down there and pose at the Art Institute in Chicago for the art classes, because you got a good build on you, so you ought to go down there and pose. So I went down to the Art Institute, and I was posing. There was a beautiful naked woman posing across the room. And she came up to me at the break. She had put her bathrobe on, and very polite lady, and but I'd already seen her naked. And she said to me, Bruce, how would you like to... And she paused like that, and I am a guy, and my mind was racing. And she said, and I thought, what the hell is she going to ask me? And then she said, be a gorilla. And what the hell is this? I thought, is this some kind of new weird sex thing that they're doing in Chicago that I don't know anything about? Not that I know anything about sex now. I think it's a constant learning process. But it turned out she was a stripper. She needed a guy strong enough to wear a 100-pound ape suit and toss her around for 15 minutes in an ape special act called Zareen and Gagi, kind of a King Kong and a girl kind of thing. And I thought, well, that sounds like a dignified thing to do. And plus, there's a lot of naked women around. And so I did the act. I went down to... I went to meet the guy who owned the act, and he had invented it for the Chicago World's Fair, and he made it very famous by calling it Zarina Andean Gaggy. And she was a famous ballet dancer, and she sued the owner of the act, and actually made it very famous by doing so. And all he had to do was change the name from Zarina to Zareen. And it was a very successful act in the World's Fair. But now it's in nightclubs. And he was a nice guy. He was basically an agent for strippers and a few other vaudeville types. And he told me to go down to the Lincoln Park Zoo and meet Bushman. Bushman was a very famous gorilla in the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. Like 400 pounds. And so I did go down there. And when Bushman was away from his, he was over at his cage, and people were in front of it, and then they kind of disappeared. And then he looked over at me, and he waved his hand at me. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I went over, and Bushman looked at me, and he said, Bruce, I went, oh, my God, he can talk. And he knew my name. And he said, Bruce, think my thoughts. I went, what? And I said, oh, okay. And he said, do my moves. I went, okay. He said, that's your first acting lesson. I said, okay, Bushman, thanks a lot. So that was my first acting lesson. And in a way, it is how simple acting is. There's so many bad acting schools out there taught by people who failed at acting, and they teach stuff that cause them to fail, that complicate and confuse people to the point where they become as bad an actor as they are, where everyone has some instincts, and some people have an instinct for acting. I think I had it, again, back when I was like 3. I remember seeing a newsreel. My mother had taken us to the movies, and back in those days, my father was very religious. It was an evil place. You couldn't go to movie theaters, but my mother and I used to go anyway. And I'd seen FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the great president, struggling to get to a microphone with his polio-inflicted body, and he was on railings and things like that. And I found that very fascinating. So I was showing my mother, I was showing her how that man was walking, and she's looking at me kind of astonished, and she says, do you love your president? And I went, huh? Oh, yeah, I love my president. I didn't love the president. I didn't even know who he was. I was just interested in that body and why he had to move like that. So I tried to capture that body. Now, in a sense, that's what all good acting is trying to capture the experience of the character that you're creating. Now, there's 2 kinds of actors that work, and some are quite good. There's a rarer type that are kind of like me or my son Crispin or Christopher Walken, where you become entirely different characters every time you work. If you look at my imdb.com, and do look at it, you'll see lots of demos and lots of bids and things, but there is a demo of me called From Past to Present of films including things like Diamonds Are Forever and Chinatown and Walking Tall and lots of scenes, and you'll see that each character I do is an entirely different character. Well, that's how I act. I've never been on screen as myself, unless it was an interview or something. So that kind of thing happens with some actors. There are also other terrific actors, like, say, Harrison Ford, who was a terrific actor, but he's always Harrison Ford. That doesn't mean he's not a terrific actor. He is. So you find out about yourself as you're working and you start to work. So back to my ape act, we went down to Florida, Tampa Bay, Florida. Poor Tampa Bay. I guess they're going through some still kind of hell down there. And that was where I was going to do my ape act. And we were, I had that 100-pound ape suit on, and I was doing it. And in those days, strip clubs would have kind of like, they were more like burlesque in a way. They would have definitely comedians, which they still do, I guess. There was a magician working in the nightclub, and there were singers, and the strippers were classier. They didn't do lap dancing, and this magician was working in a club. I remember he was from California, Hollywood, so I figure from what he was going to tell me, he was an authority. He tapped me on the shoulder with his magic wand very playfully, and he said, "Bruce, you are an actor." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You make that gorilla so believable, you ought to try acting." I went, "Really?" And then another guy who was from New York, was a singer in the nightclub, big, handsome guy. He said, "Yeah, you ought to go to New York and take acting classes." I went, "Acting classes?" there are classes for acting? He says, yeah. Well, that astonished me. I mean, in a way, I still don't believe in acting classes. I think, even though I teach acting, what I do teach is to get people back to their instincts and forget all those classes that they were told to do. And rather than that, just become the person, experiencing the person's thoughts, like Bushman told me back in the zoo, and to do the moves of the person like I learned to do when I was watching FDR. And so that instinct is there in each person, but some people don't have an instinct for acting. They might have an instinct for the art, which luckily I have both of these instincts. Now, when that guy said, you are an actor, I thought, wow, that's pretty weird. And I had been doing acting, something I didn't even realize. There was a church, my father's church was very religious, but they had a pageant where they decided to put kids up on stage pretending to be people that had these hotels and things that Mary and Joseph were looking to get a place to stay in with their baby Jesus. And I was the third kid in a row, and I was very small. Again, back when I was 3, which I guess it was a year when I discovered a lot of things about myself. And they got to me, and I was a little 3-year-old kid with a big barrel chest, and my one line was, no room at the inn. And when Joseph and Mary got to me, I boomed out, no room at the inn. And the whole church burst into laughter. And I thought, this is great. So I said it again, and they laughed even more. Then I said it again, they laughed more. Then the minister came running up the aisle trying to catch me. I ran around the aisle, yelling out the line, no room at the inn, no room. And he finally picked me up, and he's carrying me down the aisle to lock me up down in the basement. And I'm still yelling, no room at the inn. And I knew that I had a gift for making people laugh. And so, again, another instinct. But then, Depression area, my mother needed laughter all the time, so I was constantly the clown, making fun and having fun with stuff. So, okay, there was that art potential, but now there was a new door open up, this acting thing, but kind of terrified me about the idea of it. And the sports was still in the back of my mind, but I had to get. So what happens, though, I'm taking English courses, and I flunked English 3 times in a row, which got me drafted for the Korean War, which was still going on. I got to Korea the last 6 months of that war, and luckily the Chinese were very kind. They missed me. I think the North Koreans tried a little harder. But I survived the war, came back, but I caught malaria. Now, there's a book called The Tao Te Ching, which was written by Lao Tzu. It's kind of one of my favorite books. And, in fact, I should go back and jump back to that time in the library when the teacher said, you can go to Wall 4. I was so fascinated by the fact of thinking I was smarter. The first wall I went to, Wall 4, the first book I took out was Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey. And I took it home, and I thought, this is, fascinating, but it was written in that iambic pentameter, and it was difficult for, I guess I was, 9 years old maybe. And then I went to a local bookstore and took out a kind of Americanized version of the thing. And then I went back and took out the Homer and the Iliad, the original version again. And I read it every year from then on. I must have read the book, 7 times. Probably my favorite book. And that was the one I pulled out of that wall in the library, which also told me I was smarter than people did. But how did I flunk English? So I flunked English, and I'm in Korea, and I'm there the last 6 months of the war. And then when the war ended, University of California sent people over to Korea to give college courses. And I picked decided I'd better pick up some college courses, and I picked up in total another 9 hours of college credits in Korea. And one of the courses I figured I should take was a thing called English, which I flunked 3 times, which is what got me drafted into a shooting war. And I took this course, and this teacher at the end of the course said, "Bruce, stay after class. I need to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." He said, "You know, by the rules here, you're flunking the grammar test." I went, yeah. And he said, "By all the rules, I should flunk you again." I went, "Yeah." And he said, "But you're a terrific writer." He had given out writing assignments. He didn't just depend on the grammar score. He had seen that I had written 3 very nice short stories. He said, "You do some very advanced things as a writer, and I'm going to pass you." He said, "I don't know what it is about you, but let's get you through this so you can move on." I went, "Thank you very much." I wish I could remember the gentleman's name. He was very kind to me, and it did get me back into college when I got back. But, and as I said, I came back with malaria. But in that period of time, nobody knew there was a thing called dyslexia.
Okay.
I'm a dyslexic, which in a certain way means you've got an unusual brain that goes, "To hell with the rules. I'm just going to go ahead and do it." And you just get bored. Like when I had to act recently in a Polish film in Poland. I had to go there 4 times to do a film in Warsaw. And great fun. Poles are great to work with. But they would send beautiful women up to my hotel room to coach me on how to pronounce the stuff. Of course, my wife was in the other room making sure it was just a coaching session. Darn. Oh, well. But I remember one of the teachers wanted to teach me Polish grammar. I said, "Don't teach me grammar. I just want to hear how it sounds so I can say it correctly, and that's it." And so a dyslexic, and it turns out that Einstein was dyslexic. He got bad grades in college and stuff, but when he got around to physics, he jumped past everyone else because he didn't want to live by their old rules, and he invented whole new things. So in a sense, a dyslexic is an innovator because they should be innovators. So if you're dyslexic, take it as this other book I mentioned, the Tao Te Ching, which is written by Lao Tzu, has a bunch of sayings in it, and the sayings, he was kind of contemporary, or either just before, during, or after Confucius in China. And one of his sayings, and the one I liked the most, was, "Accept a disaster as a welcome gift," which I always find very amusing, but I also think it's kind of the rule of my whole life. The fact that I was a poor kid, great. It taught me how to work, taught me how to appreciate life beyond the idea of it being easy. Life shouldn't be easy. Life should be hard. That's why I guess I like Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey. It's basically the Odysseus or Ulysses making his journey through life. It's the hero's journey. Every one of us, every one of you listening, is on your own hero's journey or heroine's journey if you're a lady. And thank God if there's ladies listening, because ladies, you make every place better. You're the best. So don't ever let any guy not realize that. You are the best. I have been very fortunate that I had a long-term marriage with a beautiful woman, 56 years, Crispin's mother. And I lost her about 16 months ago, but every day it feels like it just happened. And I will never not stop missing her. So, ladies, be that. Be like my wife. Be as terrific as she was. You're all potentially terrific women out there, and I appreciate all of you. Whatever you're in, I mean, I can look back in my life and look at women in many different areas and how helpful they've been over the years. Teachers, coaches, directors, and certainly a few lovers here and there, and just girl friends who were just friends, and God knows the love of my life, my wife, and Betty, who was a ballet dancer and a Broadway dancer who started to get into acting and got into a play with me, and when the play failed, she dragged me home with her and made me have sex with her and decided that I had to marry her, and I agreed, and it was the smartest move of my life. And out of that came Crispin, my terrific son, Crispin Glover, who we've just finished the final little addendum to our 4+ year project. It's you can look it up in IMDb if you look up his site too. It's called An Untitled Crispin Glover Project, and we shot it the whole film in the Czech Republic at his estate there. He has a 20-acre estate there with a giant castle in it, or a mansion, and lots of buildings around it, and 2 stables that were turned into sound stages and other buildings. And we had people from all over Europe working on the film, and he wrote a script. I criticized it. He'd yell at me. I'd yell back a little bit, but then I'd write stuff, and then he'd yell at me more, and then accept a lot of my writing. So it's his script with added writing by me. He directs. He directed it. He plays 4 characters. I play 4 characters. 3 of my characters are 3 of his 4 characters as the older version. And the movie goes back to the end of the American Civil War, and then goes on just beyond the Second World War. So we make lots of character changes, lots of interesting stuff. He is going to be in Brooklyn, if any of you who are listening are near Brooklyn, on the 20th, showing one of his other films, one of which I'm in, and another that I did a little contribution to. And he shows the film, and then he does the Crispin Glover live show where he projects pages from these books that he's written, and books like Around My House or The Art of Rat Catching. And these books are on sale. You can buy the books, and you can get him to autograph it, which he does at the end of the show. So the show starts out with him doing this live talk show showing pages from the book while he makes pretty amusing comments and acts some of the characters in the books as they come up. Then he steps off, and he shows one of the films. What Is It is one of the films, which is an amazing film with the majority of the cast are Down syndrome people, and he doesn't. These aren't like basket case Down syndrome. They're the heroes, the lovers, the journeyers in the film. It's an amazing film. I added grave digging to that. I'm not on camera. I just did it off camera. I am also in another film called It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which I acted in, and Christian directed in that. He didn't act in that one. He did act in the first one, What Is It? Then the film that we've just finished, again, 5 trips to the Czech Republic at his estate there. We shot it mostly there with people from all over Europe. We had Russians, we had Ukrainians that lived on the property and did lots of work on the property. It's a famous house, huge house. At one point it was 54 rooms, I guess. And there's a gatehouse and rooms that the Ukrainians lived in, and then there's a makeup area, and there's it's an amazing place. when the film comes out, you'll see more about it. But just having finished the whole thing in the Czech Republic, Crispin came up with the idea of doing a little demo, a kind of a documentary of the two of us fighting about the script that would be shown before the film starts. And then at the end of the film, me and he, having just seen the film along with the audience, I say, this is terrific. I love my work in it. We got to get this shown at the Academy so I can get my Academy Award, which hopefully people will find amusing and not think I'm a pompous ass. But even though I can be kind of pompous if I want to be sometimes, it's more fun. But the idea, again, so it's now being edited. He's also shot a whole lot of miniatures that will be added into the film that are close to what was in the what we filmed in the Czech Republic, with bridges and sets and stuff that was built. All those sets are built on these what were horse stables and called ateliers, and became two studios were shooting. Very proud of that film, and I don't know how long it's going to be before it comes out. There are people interested in buying. Hopefully they'll pay him a lot of money for it. He's also in American Gods, which is a very successful new series, and he plays Mr. World. And right now, I'm looking to do a couple other projects. I still want to do some acting, but I've done 72 feature films. I did 100 television shows, and I literally did 100 theater plays, which most people don't do anymore. That's kind of what happened when I came back from Korea. I had that malaria, and again, part of that gift, accept the disaster as a gift. Mm-hmm. And the gift really was that I couldn't pick up my football scholarship, so I went back to that college where I'd played football and was walking around. I figured I'd pick up a few more college credits while I healed up from my malaria so I could go back and play football again. Yeah. And I saw a play being advertised. It was a Tennessee Williams play called Camino Real, very unusual play. And I decided maybe I should see if that magician was correct when he tapped me with his magic wand. And I tried out. And the director, who was a teacher at the college, said, yeah, come back for the callbacks. And I got involved getting my 8 back together again so I could work my way through an expensive college. I had the GI Bill, which was nice, but it wasn't going to be enough to get me through all the college, so I decided to get that 8 back and then go back to the Art Institute and pose some more. And I didn't go back to the callback. Well, I'm walking down a flight of stairs, and suddenly I see this teacher coming up at me, and he yells out, where have you been? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you didn't come back to the callbacks. I said, yeah, I know. I'm kind of busy. I'm going to do this other stuff. He said, no, I want you to play the lead. I went, oh, okay. And I'd never even seen a play before. I hadn't even read a play. Well, maybe I'd read some Shakespeare, but I hadn't read and I'd only seen movies. And I never read a book on acting. I never had any acting classes. I'd only seen movies. And I had the instinct. I was good right away. And I was. I got good reviews. Everyone else was... it was a character named Kilroy in a Tennessee Williams play, which later my first Broadway show was a Tennessee Williams play. I did Night of the Iguana on Broadway for just about a year. And Tennessee was around all the time, the kindest, sweetest man ever. And last time I saw him, my wife and I had dinner with him. And he was always a super person. But there I was in the first play, and some of the actors were like me. They were like real, like you were in movies. And my idea of good acting was Bogart, because he was always real. He was there in touch with life. And And I was working with this actor, and I looked at him, and he was like overacting. I said, "Have you ever thought of like talking to me?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, when you talk to me, I'll listen and look at you and watch you. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "When you talk to me, I'll look at you and listen and watch. And when you look at me, and that's all acting is, really." There was another acting lesson. Think my thoughts, do my moves, talk to the person, let things in. I never know what a role is going to look like until I see it later. When Billy Gordon's wife, and in a way, you have to be somewhat smart about what you're doing if you're going to be in a tough career like acting. I mean, it changes all the time. So some of the advice I could give you now doesn't exist anymore. There isn't any theater anymore. After that successful play at the theater in Chicago, I did a little community theater. I sang in a Wagnerian opera because I had a girlfriend whose mother taught Wagnerian opera. And then I went to a summer stock company where I lived out of my car, slept on the porch of the theater because they'd hired the only actors that they were going to pay. It was a non-union theater. And I literally would sneak into the kitchen to steal food and slept on the porch of the theater, lived out of my car, and have driven up, to Wisconsin from Chicago, and got good reviews all the time. And that was a summer when I realized, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. To hell with football. This is it. So I went to Northwestern. I did get a degree there. I got a Bachelor of Science in Speech. But I can't say I ever learned anything from an acting class that was being taught by somebody. What I learned was, this is Shakespeare. Now I have to lose my D's, M's, and Do's accent. How do you do this? I learned, again, to have the knowledge of where to go next. So in those days, where you went next was you went to New York. You became a stage actor. So I developed that reputation at Northwestern as being this annoying guy who could tell you if you were good or bad, and if you were bad, I'd tell you. And I was giving a few private sessions because I still needed all of them. I still was working at the lunch. For lunch, I would work washing dishes, and I was doing the 8-act till 3 or 4 in the morning. Then I'd do my first class at 9 in the morning at Northwestern. That working class dude still has that ability. I'm still a working class dude, even at my age. I don't look my age. I'm still an athlete. I played soccer for 30 years, had my own soccer team, played midfield. I believe that you've got to work out your body, and you'll last a lot longer. I've got a lot of projects I want to do. I've got a painting book I want to do. I have sold paintings for as much as $4,000. And I intend to do more of that, and I've got writing I want to do, and I still want to act some. So if somebody's got an interesting role, I might want to do it. I don't want to just act in anything. But anyway, there I was at Northwestern, picking up a few things, and this young guy, 19-year-old, great-looking kid, came up to me and said, "Will you come and watch my scene, my freshman scene?" And I said, "Sure." And I went to see it, and he was good in it. And I went up to congratulate him, and I saw there was a line of about 50 women, because the kid was gorgeous, waiting to grab him. And so I got up there. I was like the fifth one in line. I said, "Yeah, hey, you were great in that." And I said, "Congratulations, thanks for inviting me." And he said, No, hang out here. Let me get rid of all these people. And all these people were all of these women that just couldn't wait to drop their drawers for him. I mean, not that it was all that, it wasn't that common in those days, but he was gorgeous. And he told me years later that he was still a virgin back then. And so we walked around the campus, and I gave him, he asked me to critique the stuff, and I said, you're terrific, and gave a couple little pointers here and there, but basically he was a terrific. And are we done? I
No.
just heard a click.
I think that was on your end.
Oh, it was. Okay, that's cool. So you can still hear?
Yep.
All right. So he said, what should I do? I said, about what? He said, should I stay in college or should I go to New York? I said, well, what do you want? He said, well, and he got mad at me when I told this story years later. I said, you said you want to be a star. He said, I didn't say that when I was telling the story years later in his present. He was, I guess one of his sons was president. He didn't want anyone to think that he was being that pompous, but he wasn't being pompous. He was being realistic as to what he wanted, which is what every person listening should be realizing. What do you want? Now, if you know what you want, then you know what you have to do to get what you want. You have to do the work. Most people just want and they don't do the work. You have to do the work. So I said to this guy, listen, Warren, it was Warren Beatty, and I said, Warren, you got all you need to be a star. Go to New York. He went, really? I said, yeah. I said, well, you can stay here, get your master's degree and your doctorate, and then go to New York. He said, no, I'm going to New York. I said, great, good idea. So he left for New York. I had about another 6 months to get my degree. I kind of needed to get my degree just to get used to not being a working class these dems and those guy. And by the time I got to New York, I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and I see Warren coming at me, gives me a big hug, and he says, you were right, I'm a star. And he was.
Yep.
He had this stuff. And so Warren, I lied when I said you wanted to be a star. I know you didn't say that. I just made that up. Okay, Warren? Okay, forgive me for that. Anyway, I run into him every once in a while. He's always super dude. Anyway, so, and his wife's a terrific lady, too, I've met. She's a wonderful actress. The business is one of the toughest businesses in the world. If you want to be an actor, be prepared to do a lot of work and get beat up a lot. You're going to get beat up. It's hard. So, I did go to New York, and I worked my way up through off-Broadway. I did summer stock, and then I would do, I did long seasons of summer stock. I did one 20-week season where you did basically a new play every week. And in a way, I kind of think that's one of the great advantages of summer stock theater, where you didn't have time. You just had to do it. Boom. 1 week you're 18 years old. Next week you're 80. Next week you're a smart guy. Next week you're a dummy. Next week you're a good guy. Next week you're a monster. It made you be able to change and quick and quick and quick. It's what I've always done as an actor. Look at my IMDb, see the variety of stuff. Well, not too many of you have the stuff to become a successful actor. But maybe you're a writer. That's a tough area, too. I've written. It's hard to get money, for that stuff. I've got stuff published in magazines and things like that. And I've almost had the money on a couple film scripts that I've done, but I've never quite gone over the top with that stuff. The best chance I have of getting recognized as a writer is the script with my son Crispin that's going to be coming out, I suppose, and maybe another year before it's all out. I know he's got a lot of work to do on it, and he's also touring. So all of you go to Brooklyn on the 20th and see him at the Alamo Theater in Brooklyn, which they're all over the country, but the Alamo Theater in Brooklyn is where he's going to be doing his show. He'll be doing a trailer of our film, a promo of our film, so stuff of he and I in there, and and he'll be live and doing his live talk show and doing his stuff there. For me, I'm still finishing up certain kinds of legal things with banks and getting rid of banks that were holding up money that my wife had not properly labeled, and we have. I'm finally getting that money free so that I could do proper things with the money that I need to do. One of the things that I suggest people do is if you can possibly afford it, get into real estate. And the best thing about real estate, I hate the stock market. I'm in it now. I have to be because my wife was, but I'm going to have to be in it until I can figure out some other way of getting out of it and into what I really think is right is real estate, R-E-A-L, real. If you can't afford to buy a whole house, go buy graveyard plots. You can probably afford one graveyard plot. They go up in value, too, because it's real estate. It's real property. Then that gives you some kind of leverage. And you need leverage to be able to do what you want to do. The only real value of money is not to show it off and to, display yourself. I own 2 houses. The first house I kept, which everyone told me to sell and get into real estate. No, I own it. I still own it. It's here in near the marina in Los Angeles area, West L.A., and I now rent it out. But people wanted me to sell it and get a bigger house than the house I bought. Well, the house I bought, I could have afforded by selling the other house, a much bigger house, but I didn't. Too many actors get stupid. They get into drugs, or they drink too much, or they go nuts, become incredibly neurotic. You have to keep on working. Most actors have to do other work when they're on their way up. When I was in New York, my first year in New York, I used to pose at art schools for extra little money. But then in those days, New York was very cheap to live in. You had rent control, and you could have a decent way. But now everything becomes more expensive. New York, Los Angeles, tough financial places to live. So you have to figure out something to do. If you have any other skills, you need to find out stuff. You can't. The old story used to be. Somebody would say, "Well, what do you do?" "Well, I'm an actor." "Oh, really? What restaurant do you work at?" Well, that's unfortunately what most people would try to do: work in restaurants. You can't all be working in restaurants. If you've got some other skills, if you've got computer skills, work on those. If you're in college and you're getting a degree. Get a degree in something that transfers into money. Don't get a degree in philosophy, for God's sake. Some of the dumbest people I knew were in my philosophy classes. So I knew very quickly not to take any more philosophy classes. What a waste of time. Not that I disagree with philosophers. They're great. Just read the books and hell with the classes. Get your degree in something else if you're going to college. But don't go to the expensive college. Go away to your community colleges. You can get 2 years of college credits and a little more by much more inexpensively. I went to community college in Chicago. I even went back and picked up some community college courses here in L.A. Took some art courses because I wanted to learn something about etching and stuff, and it was great. There are terrific teachers in community colleges. There are terrific teachers in universities, too, but you're going to learn as much in a community college as you are going in a university. So don't get stupid about it. Don't feel like you have to go to Harvard or Yale right away, if ever. Make sure that what you're getting a degree in is something that's going to give you back a life. Don't do just what your parents want you to do either. I mean, find out what you really want to do. If you're, odd enough to become an actor, okay, remember my simple lesson. Acting is just thinking the thoughts, being in the place, doing the moves, letting stuff in. And letting stuff in means how I really work. And so doing all of these plays and doing Broadway, I did 16 Broadway and off-Broadway plays. I think only 4 of them made it back to Broadway. The off-Broadway, I had 1 year run off-Broadway where I did Kathakali dancing in a Rabindranath Tagore play. And, the great Indian philosopher, writer, King of the Dark Chamber was a play, and it was a great experience with a green face and a gold crown and big skirt and a sword and doing all these dance styles, which were terrific. Then I ran for a year on Broadway in Tennessee Williams' play, Night of the Iguana. And, these experiences are incredible, but again, television was coming in and destroying theater. So at this point, you kind of have to realize you've got to move into film, which I was trying to do as much as I could in New York. But eventually, you had to transport out to L.A. Now, there were a few, actors who were just so gorgeous and were so incredible in New York that they jumped right from New York right into star status. There were other guys like me that had to go from New York and work their way up through the television series, step by step, getting a little more here, a little more there, and I had to think of okay, this year I will do. I left a big agency, which was a great agency, because they weren't getting me out enough, and I had a wife and kid to support, and a house that we bought in the Marina area, and I had to pay my mortgage and support my wife and kid, Crispin and my wife Betty, and it demanded that I get some work. So I left the big agency and went to a smaller agency who would just get me out for anything. So I had a year of just going out for anything just to bring in income. So I would be the 6th heavy in a show. But people, sometimes on set would see I had something extra, and they would keep me over a couple extra days because they saw I had stuff, so I'd be picking up more money. Then the next year, I said to my agent, this year I do only guest starring roles. Now, that was a tough deal because guest starring roles were less opportunities. And that was a struggle year where you had to, skimp through to this one. And I remember I got 3 that year. One was a Gunsmoke, which was a terrific role, and then an Adam 12, and which had motorcycles. And in those days, New York actors had to come up and immediately tell and lie about the fact that they could ride motorcycles and horses, even though they'd never been on one, which I did, and managed to have at least 2 good motorcycle accidents and a couple of horse accidents. But you survived through it all. And now Thanksgiving was coming up that year, and I needed money, and I said to my agent, hey, I need a job, just any job. He said, well, there's a small part on Mission Impossible, and probably just a day's work. I said, I just need a job, and send me over there. So I got there, and I looked at the script, and it was less than a small part. It was just nothing. There was like 1 line or something, and the casting director said, okay, read. And I went, wait a minute, gentlemen. And I looked at the producer and the director and the casting director, and I said, gentlemen, I know you don't know my work, but I must to terrific a talent to waste on this role, which was very daring of me. And the casting director said, your agent was in here begging to bring you in, and you're coming up with this stuff. I said, yeah, I know, we're new to each other, which was a lie. And we've got to work out that communication. And the guy started yelling at me, and when the producer stopped, and he said, wait a minute, I do know your work. I saw you in a play at the Music Center, which was one of my failed Broadway plays that never made it back to Broadway, which was the thing that transitioned me to, like, this is the last straw. I've got to become an L.A. actor, a Hollywood actor. And he said, I do think you should do a guest starring role on Mission Impossible, and I will promise you one. So I said, thank you very much, and I left. And then I went out with a vacuum cleaner salesman to learn how to sell vacuum cleaners. And the idea was you would offer people $5 to come into their house and throw stuff around and show them how great this vacuum cleaner was. And the vacuum cleaner was terrific, but it was like $185, which was like a huge amount of money in those days for a vacuum cleaner. And we went to a couple places, and little did I know we were two white guys going into Watts trying to sell, black people a thing that they didn't need. And, I remember this sweet woman had a very clean apartment, and this guy comes in and he says, okay, if you want the $5, your husband's got to come out here. And she went, oh, really? Okay, and calls him out, and I heard this grumble, and this guy came out, and he looked like he was ready to kill us. And I sat as close to the door as I could. I couldn't blame the guy. He was like, these two goons are in my apartment, and I'm having to put up with them for this stupid $5 that I need. And the guy, I'm sitting there like, oh, my God, please let us get out of here alive. The guy's trashing the apartment, scattering stuff, and then he's showing how great the vacuum cleaner works. And we leave, and we went to another place for a similar occasion, and then we went to critique what he had done. And so he was supposedly my teacher, and he said, see, that was great, that all went great. And I said, yeah, great, right. And I knew what the gimmick was. You had to convince people that they would eventually get the vacuum cleaner free, but you'd sign them up to a contract, and they'd be stuck paying off the contract, and they'd never get it free. Morally, I knew technically that I had the skill to do it, which this other guy really didn't. But I couldn't morally do that to people. I could not lie to them and try to convince. So I never went back to the vacuum. I was supposed to go back the next day and get my own apparatus and go out and give $5 to people and destroy their lives. So I called the Yellow Cab Company, and I was going to have an interview the next day for go drive a cab. And then I got an agent. My agent called and said, you got a guest star on Mission Impossible. It's a 2 weeks job. I went, great. That saved me from my having to sell vacuum cleaners or to drive a cab. Now I'm doing the job, and it was great. It was a nice big chunk of money. It was over 2 weeks, and it was a good guest starring role in Mission. I did a couple more of those later on. And when the thing was finished, my agent said, oh, there's another gig for you called Paris 7000. Would you like to do it? I said, yeah, guest starring role. He said, no, it's just a 3-day job, but, it's just pick up the money. The show's going off the air anyway, and it's just 3 days' work, and nobody will ever see it anyway. I went, okay. But the character was a French mortician, so I had to do it with a French accent. And the George, what's his name? George was the lead in the thing, and he was this diplomat in Paris. And he was supposed to see this girl who he had a love affair with, and I was the mortician, and I would look at him and say, oh, you knew her, because he would be showing all of this emotion on his face. And so I did the role with the French accent, and I remember the actor who was the big lead. He's still around. He was a nice guy. But when I looked at him, he would just have this blank face, and I'd look at him and supposedly be able to tell from his blank face that he had suffered a great loss of this girl. And I went, you knew her. Well, Billy Gordon, this casting director, his wife was studying French, and she saw the show, and she called her husband and she said, hey, well, hon, there's a new French actor in town. You ought to take a look. And he came in. He said, yeah, he's a very good actor. I've got to look him up. And then he realized he, too, had seen me in that play at the Music Center and realized that I'd fooled him. And he was so impressed by that when the Blessed Beasts and Children came up, he called me in for the audition. I went in for the audition. They just had called in 6 guys for the two parts that were going to be these 2 pool players, they were eventually called. There were a couple of drunken cowboys, basically, harassing these boys who were going to try to release the buffaloes from being shot. And so my agent had described it wrong, and she said he was a hippie. So I went in dressed with bell-bottom trousers and a big flowery shirt with a big ruffled collar and kind of hippie glasses, and my hair as fluffed up as it could be, and I was wearing jewelry. And I came in, and all the other guys were dressed in Levi's and cowboy hats. I looked like the Wicked Witch of the West. And Stanley Kramer was interesting. He had us all read the part, and then while we were all there, he said, okay, gentlemen, thank you all for coming in. I've chosen these 2 guys for the part, and I wasn't one of them, but it was fine, He picked the 2 guys and said, you 2 stay, and the rest of you, thank you very much. So we all left, and then about 4 weeks later, I got a call from my agent and said, you want to do Blessed Beasts and Children? I said, yeah, different part. He said, no, the same one. The guy that he had cast got a film in Israel and decided to go do that because it was more weeks' work, and he wanted to go to Israel. And I went, okay. So I had the same part that I auditioned for, dressed up in my flouncy shirt and stuff. And the casting director said I should go meet, go and meet Stanley Kramer. So I went to his office and tapped on the door, and he said, yeah. And I said, hi, I'm Bruce Glover. And he went, who? I said, Bruce Glover. I'm the guy who's going to be playing one of the pool players. He looked at me like, huh? And he said, yeah, Billy told me I was your next choice. Well, okay. He didn't remember me at all. I wasn't his next choice. It was Billy Gordon lied to him and told him I was his next best choice. And so then we get to, we're going to do this thing in Arizona, and up north near the Grand Canyon area. And so that day I figured I'd kind of like to meet Billy. And again, I don't know what I'm going to do with the part, but I get into a poker game with Stanley Kramer because I figured I'd kind of like to get a feel for what he's like. So it's the only game of poker I ever played, but I just wanted to see that was like. And then after the game, the hotel I was in, there were a couple of really pretty women came at me and were really very flirty. They said, "Do you want to come up to this bar with us and see what it's like around here?" And this was in northern Arizona, and I said, "Yeah, but I have to get back because I'm shooting in the morning. I have to be back at the latest by 11 o'clock." And I said, "Don't worry, we'll get you back." And then it turned out she had their they both had husbands, and they all packed me into their car and drove me up to this Western bar up in the town. And I'll remember the name after our interview is all over with. But it was the town was a courthouse with a lawn on it. If you remember seeing Billy Jack,
yeah,
that was the town. Do you know the name of the town?
Not offhand, no, but I know the film Billy Jack.
Yeah, and anyway, one side of the street was all Western bars, and the town was just an L around this thing, and the other side were just no houses. There was an L shape, and there were some normal stores with maybe 1-2 stores beyond the L jutting the other direction. So they get us into this bar, and when we get to the bar, first thing I see is this guy hanging on the bar with both hands kind of leaning forward with this panicked look on his face, sweat pouring down his face, and he's obviously had too much to drink, and he's about to hurl about 15 feet of you-know-what in whichever direction happens to be in that direction. And I thought the best thing to do is get past this guy as fast as we can. Now we get past that guy, and there's this loud, noisy bar, and there's a big dance floor, and the girls are like still flirting with me, but they're then I'm looking at the dance floor, and there's these gigantic women with huge thighs and legs, and they're dancing with these little skinny cowboys, and I'm thinking, wow, look at these cowboys. And everyone's drinking like crazy, and I keep saying, well, okay, this has been great. I need it. And they're not driving me back. I said, no, hang on. And I'm like, and it's like midnight, and I'm still there, and I know I've got an early call in the morning, like 6 in the morning, and I'm like, this is crazy. And then I'm looking at these skinny cowboys dancing with these huge women. I'm thinking, no wonder they can go ride Brahma bulls. If they can dance with those huge women, they're not afraid. How brave of them. And then finally at 2 in the morning, they're closing this place. It might even have been 2:30. And we're walking back towards the entrance, and I see this same guy hanging on the bar, and then I realized it was a man. It was a wax figure. It was brilliantly done. It still looked very real, and best one I've ever seen. You'd see those commonly all over Utah, all over, not Utah, all over Arizona. So now we get out to the sidewalk, and I'm looking to get in the car with them bunch, and they're going to drive me up to my hotel, and I figure, well, I'll get a couple hours sleep in anyway. And now they're in a discussion with this woman, and she's pointing at me, and they're looking at me, and it's a big fat woman over near the curb. And one of the guys comes over and says, she wants you to come to a party at her house right now. And I said, I can't go to a party at her house. I've got to go back to the hotel and get some sleep. I've got to shoot in the morning. And then he goes back to town, and then I hear her screaming, that's stuck-up Hollywood's SOB. He's too pompous to come to my party. And they're screaming, and they're having a big argument. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I see one of those skinny little cowboys walking to his truck down a few cars away. And I run over to him and said, are you going up to this road here? And he said, yeah. I said, could you give me a lift up to that hotel? He said, sure. So he drove me up and dropped me up at the hotel. I ran into my room, and now it was too late for me to leave a call back. So I just left the blinds open, lay down fully clothed on the bed, and tried to go to sleep, and before I could even get to sleep, there's a pounding on my window, and those two women and their husbands are pounding on the door and window and saying, come on, you got to come to the party. And I'm like, I'm not moving, I'm not responding, and finally they leave, and they go, boy, that guy can really sleep. And I thought I did get to sleep. And then the light came up because I'd left the blinds up, and I woke up, and I was feeling great. And somehow, all of that odd thing of going to the bar and all of that had become inculcated into the character. That was into the character that I did. In a sense, it's a kind of insane research that I do as an actor. And now I'm on the set and I see Stanley Kramer, and you never know what's going to open a door for you as an actor. I can see him loving what I'm doing. He's walking around, he's enjoying the hell out of it. And I knew that he's opened the door for me. And then he comes up and says, guys, you're all in luck because of our shooting schedule and the rain situation. We can't finish here. You've got another 4 weeks. We put you on hold on pay, and you got an 8-week job out of this. So I finished, and it was just a 2-scene part, but I finished it in the studio. And when I got back to the studio in L.A., Kramer looked at me and he says, so, what do you want to do? I went, what do I want to do? And then I said, well, okay, and now next thing I know, I'm kind of semi-directing the scene. And he's loving it. He's letting me do what I want to do. And I made up lines and added lines to the character. So when the film came around for Diamonds Are Forever, the new James Bond film with Sean Connery coming back, and Jill St. John. There's 2 characters in the thing that they're auditioning for, and I understand that they're bad guys. And I don't know anything other than that. I haven't read the script. I didn't audition for the director, Guy Hamilton, or the producers, or did Billy Gordon. He had told them I was the guy. Now, the final meeting, there is me and 2 other guys. One is Putter Smith, and the other is another guy that was kind of a character actor, kind of, not quite as odd-looking as Putter, but an actor that I knew a little bit, and I thought, oh, my God, I've got the part. These 2 guys are being auditioned to see which one will go with me. And the other guy I knew, not Putter, the other guy I knew a little bit, and I started talking to the producer and director and what a great actor he was. I didn't realize then that he was my competition. Putter was the one who had the part. I didn't. I was auditioning against the guy I was bragging about being a great actor. And I suppose that confidence worked for me, but also the fact that physically, Putter and I were so physically different, it was a much better match. But Guy Hamilton was one of those great directors, like my son is a great director, Roman Polanski is a great director. Great directors have a tendency to cast people just on instinct. Guy had seen Putter Smith playing bass fiddle with Thelonious Monk, the great jazz musician, and had seen Putter playing that bass fiddle, and he was so unusual looking and with his crazy hair and stuff, and thought, this is one of the guys, and then brought him in for meetings and stuff like that, and they had pretty much decided he was going to be definitely one of the guys. And then they brought in these other 2 guys, me and this other guy, who was a good actor, but I went in there totally confident. I guess that helped in a way, thinking I have the part, and eventually I did have the part, and I was told I had the role. Then I saw the script. Then I realized the character is gay. That was the first I realized it. Now, my wife being a ballet dancer and a Broadway dancer eventually in New York, we had her gay buddies around all the time. Like, oh, Bruce, you 2 get divorced. I don't know which one I'm going to marry. And I'd be, well, it won't be me, buddy. At any rate, I used to love doing takeoffs on gays like that, right at their face, just for the fun of it. Oh, you're so sweet, just fun to do that stuff, But I didn't want to do that with the role. And I was afraid of, again, like I didn't know quite what I was going to do with the cowboy, the drunken cowboy. And I kind of don't ever want to know what I'm going to do with a role until it's kind of like I'm there doing it. I don't overplan. We have an unusual brain. Sigmund Freud, one of the first dudes trying to make sense about it, made some real nonsense about it, and he decided we had a three-part brain. I think partly I could attribute the fact that he was doing a lot of cocaine on the side, or maybe up front, thinking that was an elixir to his brain or something. But he decided we had a three-part brain. And the three-part brain, id, ego, superego, is one of the reasons why there's still a lot of problems with acting for a lot of people. Freud's, and having been brought up in that tough working class neighborhood with a lot of crazy people around, everyone I knew was crazy. Both my parents were crazy. All the religious people around were crazy. People in school were crazy. All of the people that run away from Europe because of Hitler were crazy. And I wanted to understand how people function. And again, that's an instinctual thing that I have that kind of makes me basically a good psychologist as a teacher, which in a way is what a good actor should be doing. An actor is a kind of constant psychologist trying to figure out how people are functioning. Well, as a teacher, that's what I do as a teacher. I first see how a person is functioning or malfunctioning. And then whatever they're doing that's right, I will encourage and try to figure out why it's right and get them to figure out why it's right and not have to work on that area at all. People work on stuff they shouldn't be working on because they're told to by a lot of bad acting teachers. That kind of almost goes back to Sigmund Freud's stupid idea of id, ego, superego. The id was just this basic sex maniac, and that's all it was. Sure, sex is important, but it's not, it's not that important. I mean, it's important, but it deals with humor. I mean, taking it too seriously is losing your sense of humor about life. And then the other part, the id, the ego was kind of like the intelligent part that in the middle, and then the superego, which was the only part that Freud had right. Now, in doing my studies, and I do have a minor degree in psychology, but that's not my real study of how people function is looking at people. Not only if I happen to be teaching a class or talking to a large group of people or just observing people in a restaurant or walking down the street, observation of people is a very important part of acting. Well, it's a very important part of all art. It's what you're letting in that is important. Art for me, being a painter, and I have sold paintings. I've sold for as much as $4,000, and I am going to work on a book. A lot of it has to do, whenever I was on a set, I would do sketches of the crews working and things like that, so I've got a lot of paintings referring to that. But I also do abstract expression stuff, and I want to keep exploring stuff. The writing I also have an animated piece that I am working on that I would like to expand into a full-length animation film. I would do some animation. I might intermix it with live actors. But it's something that I do want to be exploring. I'm a person with projects constantly going on in my brain, and I have so many things going on in my brain. I'm going to have to live a long time because even though I don't look my age, and I'm not going to. I did have a great-grandmother who lived to be 105 in Sweden, so I'm going to have to outdo her in order to get all my stuff done that I need to do. If you look at pictures of me, see, I don't have any gray hair. I have very few wrinkles, and I'm still athletic, so it's a weird thing. But back to the whole idea of the brain and how it's structured. Well, in my studies, I did run across a school of psychology called the Transactional Analysis School. And I like the title itself. I still like the title. It's Transaction, no, Analysis. Well, everything we do is a transaction. And then to analyze it, to figure out, why did we do that? How did we get into doing it that way? Why do we do it that way? And then, certainly, I guess you can say, well, what's wrong with me? Or what's right with me? You know, what things do I do that, in analyzing it, I do because there's some kind of stupid reason for doing it? What if there isn't a stupid reason for doing it? What if there's a good reason for doing it? So a transactional analysis, I like the title itself, but they also kept the three-part brain idea. Well, the three-part brain, they called it differently. That id, that sex maniac thing that Freud had invented, they called it the child. Okay. Now you bring in the humor, because the child does a lot of laughing if you're having any kind of good childhood. And certainly if you're having any kind of good adulthood, you better have some child still going. If I don't laugh 9 times a day, I'm not living. Even the night before my wife and I had our last dinner together, we laughed. I even laughed in the hospital as I was helping her on and off bedpans, telling her what a beautiful ass she still had, which made her laugh. It's life has to accept the tragedy, you know, disaster as a welcome gift, because the welcome gift teaches you constantly. And if you're not learning something every day, then you're not living. I only, you know, it's not the only reason I teach. I do teach because I like to help people. But I'm learning while I'm teaching. A teacher who is not learning and is still calling himself a teacher is not a teacher. That was, you know, what was wrong with most of the big schools of acting that became very famous, Strasberg, Meisner, Stella Adler, all intelligent people, but none of them were great actors. They all were smart, so they tried to figure out how this must happen. So they wrote down all these rules of the things that you would have to do in order for you to be a good actor. Now, they're incorrect. You don't have to do all those things. Going back to the simple things that I say, letting life in. Well, there I was about to do the first gay character with another guy who was also not gay, Putter Smith, who's married, as I was. He has children. We had Crispin. Now I'm like, I'm terrified. I don't want to do a bad gay person, you know, like a dumb one. I mean, I had many gay friends. I had, you know, that were great people, who were talented and fine and very helpful and good people. But I didn't want to do that takeoff thing that I'd enjoy doing every once in a while. Still have fun doing it now and then, which is a takeoff. I didn't want to do a takeoff. So I asked Guy Hamilton, who was also hadn't read me, but he had taken Billy Gordon's role, and probably, maybe, the only thing he'd seen was me doing that redneck drunken cowboy. Now, he's courageous enough, when we meet, to listen to me say, Guy, do me a favor. He says, oh, what is that, Bruce? He said, I said, Guy, don't tell me which of the two characters I'm playing. He says, really? Why's that? I said, you know, I don't know, Guy. I just, at this point, I don't want to know which one. He went, oh, all righty. So he even went ahead and he probably told Putter Smith not to tell me which one he was playing. And I'm not quite sure that I knew right then why I didn't want to know. But I would say I didn't want to be thinking of the lines and how a gay person would be saying the lines. So I didn't look at the lines. I read the script, but I wasn't thinking either or, which one am I going to be, Mr. Wint or Mr. Kidd? I was thinking about the situation. So, bravest, dumbest thing I'd ever done was, as an actor, scared the hell out of myself. Now I'm out on the set outside of Vegas, 7 in the morning in the desert, waiting to get dressed, do makeup, and probably in a couple hours we'll be on camera playing one of the two characters, and I still don't know which one I'm playing. Now that's crazy, but it also was very brave and allowed me to come up with some unusual stuff. Now, I'd already been teaching for years and years and years, because right after I coached that guy in my first play, I had 7 students hanging around me going, well, how do we do this? That's where I started coaching already. I was always kind of semi-teaching. But in teaching, it's more of an exploration for me than it is a pompous big dude standing on a podium saying, this is the way to do it. I'm saying this is the way to explore it, and don't tie yourself down. So left brain, right brain. What? Wait a minute. Transactional analysis people, we had the 3. They said child, and they called the middle brain, the ego, the adult. Oh, good. And they called the superego, the part that Freud had correct, the parent. The parent. That's perfect. Exactly. Well, going with that, and then finally I winnowed it down, and I went, wait a minute. There is no 3 parts. There's 2 parts. There is the right brain and the left brain. The left brain is the parent. The right brain is the animal. Sure, the child and the adult are both the animal, but it's living life. It's letting things in. The left brain, as all of us have a parent in us, has that desire to make things be correct. Now, art isn't about being correct. Art, whether it's painting, writing, or painting, it's a living process that evolves as you're living it. Like even everything has to be lived for it to be authentic. There are actors who have taken on all these rules, and they, first of all, unfortunately, we have a brain, or fortunately, whatever, that deals with language. And the part that deals with language is the left brain. And if the left brain were damaged, it's possible you could lose your ability not only to speak, but to understand speech. People that have that kind of injury, sometimes the right brain eventually learns to move in and take over the job that the left brain had been doing. But again, the left brain is about doing things correctly. So when it reads a script, and this is why a lot of times I get people to do stuff without allowing them to read it. I will just say the words and get them to say the words. I'll get them to say the words as a child to get away from the pomposity of being correct. I'll get them to mess around and to not be so rule-driven. The parent in all of us is a useful thing. but you don't want to be reading the script and letting your parent tell you how to say it. And unfortunately, that's as far as some actors ever go. They've read the script. They can only do it the way their parent spanked them into doing it. And they're tied with it. And that's the way they do the role. They're like robot automatons. Real life never comes in. You know, it's like some writers, you know, like Tennessee Williams was a right-brain writer. He would let life come in. Miller was more of a left-brain writer. He was more Ibsen-esque. Williams was more of a living the life kind of thing. So I preferred doing a Williams play to doing a Tennessee Williams play. I mean, I'm doing a Arthur Miller play. Miller at times would somehow, the right brain would come in and sneak in and throw off his rules, his ifs and s rules. And the Tennessee Williams approach would sneak up on him. But again, writing has to be about life. You're not quite sure where it's going to go from one direction to another. So there I was, out in the desert, not knowing which character I was playing. And you're getting your suits and your makeup, and Putter Smith is doing the same. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to fail at this. I'm going to get fired. So fire me and bring in a good actor. And I said, wait a minute, you better talk to your teacher. Well, who's your teacher? You. Listen to yourself. Okay, teacher, what's happening? You're all locked up in a big ball of cement, whirling around going, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail. Well, you got to get out from inside the ball. You got to break free. Smash your way out of here. Go out. So what was there? 7 in the morning out in the desert, cool air, wonderful, cool desert air, and I'm 7 in the morning. I'm looking up. What is there? Blue sky, blue sky, blue sky, blue sky. Nobody knows I'm going through this stuff. I'm looking cool. Nobody knows I'm in just torturous chamber of hell, but slowly breaking my way out by letting the blue sky in, letting it in, letting it in, letting it in. And I don't know how long I did that, but then I said, well, maybe it's time to start looking at the ground. So I started let's look at the sand. It's not sand, it's dust. It's just dust. Then I started looking at people, but I couldn't look at faces yet. I would count buttons on people's clothing. Then finally I took in a big breath of air, and it was that cool desert air, and I went, I feel great. This is great. I feel great. This is wonderful. Wow, look at all these people. There's 150 people out there setting up stuff for the set. Look at that. Amazing. I feel great now. Okay, so I'm playing a gay guy. What am I going to do? Look over there. There's Putter Smith. That's my gay partner. That's the guy. Oh, my God. Gay people kiss. Look at that guy's mouth. Snakely teeth, weird mustache, snakely hair, a weird body, weird lips. Yeah, I don't want to kiss this guy. No, no way I am kissing this guy. If I got to kiss a guy, he better look just like a girl. No. Kissing is out. I'm not kissing Putter Smith, no way. So if I'm not kissing, I'm not even going to begin to think of the other sexual things that gay men do with each other. So no sex at all. Zero on sex. Now look over at Putter. But this is your guy. Here's your partner. What about this guy? He's hilarious. He's hilarious. Musicians, you can see, hear hearing music. He's walking around slapping hands, feeling very happy. He doesn't know how hard acting is. He's going to have a good time. And I think, I love this guy. He's great. I love him. He's like a big, giant toy. Just plug the key in the side, twirl it around, punch the button, and he's the toy. He's my toy. He's my toy. So now that's a relationship. It's not a sex partner. He's my toy. I own him. He's my toy. So later when Jill St. John is being congratulated by him of being pretty, I can get angry at him because he's my toy, not because he's my sex object. Then suddenly a guy comes up and said, Bruce, come over and pick out your scorpion. I went, oh, my God, I'm Mr. Wint. I was hoping to be Kid. It's so much nicer a sound, but Wint, ick. And I'm going to be holding a scorpion in my bare hand. I don't want to be holding a scorpion in my bare hand. Oh, ick, ick, ick. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, wait a minute. You're a big show-off actor. You love being noticed. You're going to be the only guy on a set with a scorpion. I've got a scorpion, and you don't. I've got a trick, and you don't. That was a character. He's my toy, and I've got a trick. And, hour later, everything went fine. The lines all came zoom, zoom, zoom. There weren't that big line, but the character was there right from the beginning, and that was it. Thank you. Thank you all of those people that rewarded me with the opportunity, the terrific writer, Thomas Mankiewicz, who was a gay man himself, had a wonderful sense of humor about it and wrote those characters in it. And if you read the original books, they were just a couple of goons, where in the film they become hilarious characters and allowed me to use all of my skills to make it funny. Every idea I had, Guy would listen. I would say, Guy, how about, and he said, all right, show me. And I would show him. And then he would call over the Aussie DP, and he'd say, now show him. And the Aussie was this crusty old Aussie, and he was going, yep. And then Guy would say, all right, let's shoot it. And my final moment of the film with Connery shoving the yaha up my hee-hee, which was rudely done on his part, blowing up my you-hoo-hoo, was my idea of it being funny. This was the last sexual moment that Mr. Wint would ever have, and it would be a semi-joyous moment. And it is the biggest laugh in the whole film. But there are countless laughs all the way through the film that are my idea, that came from Guy Hamilton allowing me to throw my idea at him and him accepting him. And so that was a great opportunity. So, I have to be grateful to Tom Mankiewicz and Guy Hamilton and Cubby Broccoli and certainly Sean Connery and Jill St. John and certainly Putter Smith. You never know what's going to be an advantage, but, you'll have other films or other parts where you don't have that advantage. You don't get all of these things coming at you in triplicates. You'll have to make things work when everything going around you is, like you've got a terrible script to start out with, and it happens more often than most actors realize. How do you make a terrible script? Sometimes, I had to take parts just to keep the money coming in to pay me the mortgage and support my wife and kid. And so, the reality of the business is constantly adjusting. And knowing how to adjust is, I guess, goes all the way back to my childhood, being a working class kid who could adjust, and that's how you need to do it. So, I talked a lot. How much more do you want me to say? You got any questions?
Well, I would love to hear about your experience on Chinatown and working with director Roman Polanski and, of course, Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, and, of course, John Huston.
Great, yeah. Well, it's an incredible script, of course, and you're gifted by a great writer writing a great script. And a great director, Roman Polanski, who I was a fan of before I got the part. Here was another one where I didn't audition for the role. It was a meeting with Roman Polanski in a dark office at Paramount late at night, where we sat across from a table, a big coffee table, from each other. And in those days, you didn't have as much film to show to people. You didn't have DVDs and stuff like that. You might have a book full of photos and things. And so I would open up these various books and things, and Polanski was there, and I'm there, and he's looking at me, and I was talking about this script, and he'd look at stuff, and then he looks over at me, comes across the table, and he grabs both my wrists, and he says, "Why are you wearing two watches? These ones are Mickey Mouse. Why are you wearing the Mickey Mouse?" And I explained to my father that was a jeweler, and these are things that he had given me as gifts. And we talked about stuff, and he says, so, we were chatting about things and had a very interesting meeting. And then he said, okay, it's very good to meet you and all that stuff. So later I got the part, and, I thought the part was okay. I didn't think it was like a great role, but it turned out to be a lot greater than I realized it was going to be, because it grew as we worked on a thing. Polanski let me improvise stuff, and Nicholson was great to work with. Polanski and I got in a good relationship, but one of the first things, the first day I was on the set, he said, "Jack," and he always called Nicholson Jack, and he always called me Glover. He said, "Jack, I need to talk to Glover in your trailer here. Let me use your trailer." And Jack went, "Yeah, okay." So we went into Nicholson's trailer, and we sat down, and Polanski looked at me, and he says, "What I want from you is you, the way you were in the office with me." I went, "Oh, okay, I can do that." He said, "Okay, that's what I want." So he always called me Glover. And then I'm still a bit of a chess player, not as good as I thought I was way back then, but I challenged Polanski into chess games. So on set, we would be playing chess between takes. And I mostly won, but then he was directing a movie, and I was just usually, on a day I wasn't working or whatever, I would just come down. But he let me come into the editing room, and I would go on the set because I wanted to learn. To me, Roman was like a constant Bible of knowledge and just interesting experiences. I mean, one of the greatest experiences I ever had in my life was, knowing Polanski and working with him and playing chess with him. And Nicholson would kibitz our games, and Jack was great to work with. Actors like Jack or Sean Connery are guys that, as soon as the camera's off, they're back to being themselves. They're able to relate and talk, and that's the way I am. Between takes, I'm not the character. I'm Bruce. I talk to the crew, and I suggest that anyone on a film get to know the crew. You certainly want to know you're going to get to know your makeup person well, and your wardrobe people will, but your makeup person. But the important people you need to know are your camera people and your sound people, because they're the people who are looking at you. I remember some of my early times out in L.A. where having done a lot of theater, you're used to the director being there and commenting on your work a lot. But in film, television especially, the poor director isn't got time to talk to you if you're doing all right. They only talk to you if you're sneaking or doing something wrong. So I was good, and I didn't know that I was good, and nobody was ever talking to me. And I remember, like, wondering, am I doing all right? You know, nobody's ever saying. I remember there was a cameraman that had been on one before, and I forget his name, a nice guy, something like Scotty. I said, Scotty, how's this look to you? He said, huh? I said, what I'm doing, because he's looking through the camera at me, and what am I doing? Does that look good to you? Does it look right? And he said, yeah, it's fine, Bruce. I went, oh, okay. You have to realize that if you're doing all right, you're not going to get a lot of attention because the poor director is harried enough trying to do other things to get the film in on time, so he gets to be hired again.
Speaking of directors, of course, you had John Huston in that film. Do you have any memories of him in that?
Oh, sure. No, I mean, one of my favorite scenes of all was one that I use in my acting class all the time when he... they cut it out of the film, unfortunately. I remember I was in the editing room and they were talking about cutting it, and I thought, oh, Jesus, don't cut that scene. But, no, I sat and had dinner with him in Chinatown one time and was complimenting on his film, and then I went on to compliment him on... Stagecoach, which he said, oh, no, that's John Ford. Well, that's right. Well, at least I compliment you on another great director. He was, I remember talking to him a little bit about being in Japan and Korea and stuff like that, and his experience was different. I was there during the war as a corporal in the Army, and he said, so did you ever go to such and such a restaurant? And I went, no, John, I was just a corporal in the Army. I couldn't afford places like that. But he was a brilliant man to look at on the set and be around. I loved, one of the great talents of all time. His daughter was around quite a bit, too, who at that time was having a relationship with Jack.
Mm-hmm. Angelica, yep.
Yeah, and I remember talking to her, and I was saying, why aren't you acting? She said, well, I did it once, and I don't know, it wasn't that. I said, well, you should be. You have terrific presence and quality. You should be acting again. She said, really? Yeah, do it. And she said, well, I'll think about it. It was before she had really started having an acting career, but she had done one thing before and hadn't been too happy with herself or something. But, so Houston was always present. I liked being on the set just to soak in the stuff. I'm very much a learner constantly. I want to learn about the crew. I mean, and know who the people are you're going to be working with. If you're smart, you get to know the people you're going to work with because they're the ones who can help you and make your day better. There are times when... But, so I remember one day, Faye had been... when I was a Broadway actor, I remember... I was in Night of the Iguana, and George Segal was in a play next door. And we were all kind of finishing our plays at the same time. We'd get on the subway and ride downtown. He lived in the Village, and I lived in the East Village. And we all became buddies. George and I and other guys that were in Broadway shows that were letting out at the same time. One day, when we were all out, we got on our car, and suddenly we looked at the end of the car, and here was this incredible beauty, this goddess sitting almost enthroned at the end of the car. And she had almost an Asian kind of beauty to her. And we all like, wow, who is that? And later on, we realized it was Faye Dunaway. She was uptown at the Lincoln Center, and she'd get on the subway train, the same train we were going to get on, down around 45th Street. and she'd be getting on up around 57th Street where the Lincoln Center was. And there she was, and me and George and at least two other goons were suddenly like ape men looking at her going, ooh, 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 ooh. Like here was this incredible beauty from another planet. And we all started flirting with her like crazy. And then she was kind of haughty and not looking at us, but she was looking over to her right. And over to her right was a tall, beautiful, gay dancer guy hanging on a strap there, and she was looking at him. And he was looking at us. And we were all, flirting with her, and eventually I got to talk to her, and I got her phone number, and I was going to ask her to do a scene with me at the Actors Studio, but we never did get together on that. But anyway, in the meantime, she became a big star. So that was the last time I'd seen her was in those days in New York when we were all, the goons trying to flirt with the beautiful goddess, and including George. And, of course, George and I were both married, but that didn't mean we didn't flirt. Years later, when I'm in Chinatown, there's this scene coming up that Faye is going to be in. It's the first time I've been going to be on the set with Faye since those early Goon days. And Nicholson and I were there on the set, and Polanski's there, and he says, Jack Glover, we're having trouble getting Faye out of makeup. She's very slow. So maybe just we rehearse the two of you doing these lines before she comes in. And I went, okay. And I was very uptight that day and really clutched. Like, oh my God, I'm going to be on a Faye and set with Faye Dunaway, who's now a big star, and I'm one of those weirdos who used to flirt with her in the subway. I hope she doesn't remember that, whatever. And so we do the scene, me and Nicholson, and we finish it, and Polanski looks at me and goes, Glover, you're so phony already. What are you going to be like when the camera's on you? It's my favorite piece of direction ever. It was the best thing you could ever have said to me at that point, because the worst thing they could ever say to an actor has just been said, so you've already blown it. And I laughed. And Nicholson looked at me like he's looking at what was that idiot laughing about. But it relieved all of my tension, of course. And then finally when Faye did come on the set, and Faye at those days was, I think in her early transition from doing theater, was still approaching the play kind of left brain, approaching the script kind of left brain, where she had it all clearly what she was going to do. She wouldn't relate to anybody when she walked on or off the set or off, when the camera wasn't rolling. She would stay in this character and walk in with kind of like her eyes closed, kind of in a tunnel. And so when she came on and did the scene, it was fine. It's a scene where Nicholson tries to tell a story about how the Chinese make love.
Yep.
And then Faye comes in at the end, and my character is like, and kind of the way I related to Jack was, Jack had flagrant kind of craziness about him, which I loved Jack, and I loved everything that he did, and I liked his work. But I also thought he was a nutty bastard in a lot of ways, but a likable nutty bastard. But I loved him, and I kind of based my relationship as Duffy, the character, with him as my boss in the same way. I know you're going to screw up in some way, but I love you, man. I'm going to try to guide you through it, and I'm here for you no matter how much you screw up. I'm your buddy, but you're going to do a dumb thing. I know you're going to do it. And that's kind of what I was doing during the scene. As I'm looking at him, I'm trying to convince him not to tell the story, but then I'm like, oh, well, give up. The guy's going to blow it. Now he's blown it. Now he looks at me, and I'm like, well, I warned you. It's like I knew you were going to screw up. But to me, it's one of the funniest scenes in the movie, and it really is. And Jack was great to work with, and Faye, of course. After the film was over, then at a reception, Faye was very open and very friendly, and I bumped into her a couple times since, and she's always very kind and very friendly, and I think he continued evolving into greater and greater acting. She's done some marvelous, marvelous work, but she did marvelous work in the film, tied in, with Jack, working with Jack and with Polanski, and yeah, there was this one day when we were going to shoot that scene. Walter and Faye and the girl playing the daughter, and Jack and me and the other buddy to Jack were in handcuffs. Cops had caught us. For some reason or other, we're in handcuffs, and there's a scene where she has to take a gun out of her purse and shoot her father.
Mm-hmm.
And she was having trouble getting it out of the purse, so Roman had to stop the camera. He said, no, look, Faye, don't put it in the purse. Just, no, the camera's over here. Have the gun, just lift it up like this. It looks like it's coming out of the purse. And if it's, nobody will, she said, no, Roman, I've got it all worked out. I can do it like this. The handkerchief, I'll get this handkerchief and I can do it. And Roman said, no, just do it the way I tell you. I mean, just lift the hand and he said, no, Roman, I want to do it this way. I can do it this way. And he said, do it my way. He said, no, I want to do it. And he said, you're a cunt.
Oh.
And she looked at him and she said, you're a little cunt. And then the big guy standing behind me, a terrific actor, he's gone now, playing the big lump guy. He's got a cigar and he sticks a cigar in my ear and he says, you're a cunt. And then I bump my buddy in the ribs and I say, you're a cunt. And then he turns to somebody else and it goes through the whole set. Everyone calls everyone else a cunt. Faye strides off the set. Roman says, okay, we'll rest for a minute. And, eventually it all got taken care of and we did it right. And the scene looks terrific. And it's amazing. It's an amazing film, and I'm very, very proud to be in it. And I think, it's incredible experience working on it, and I'm just sorry that Roman did a couple of dumb things and is still in the country directing here, but it was an incredible experience. And any other questions you have about that film?
Not about that one. I was going to ask you about Walking Tall, another big film you were in.
Yeah, that was another one where I didn't have to audition. The first film, of course, was a great film. The second two, unfortunately, for various reasons, weren't. The first film, Joe Don Baker playing Buford,
mm-hmm.
and myself playing his deputy. And this, again, was an occasion where there were bigger name actors that wanted to get my part, but somehow they went with me. And I guess I'd shown certain things or something. People had seen stuff. And again, I don't I didn't read for the part. It just was a casting situation where people went by past credits or something, and here I am going to do the part. Now, Joe Don was terrific in the part, and then Felton Perry, who was going to play the black deputy. We were two guys from Chicago, a black guy and a white guy from Chicago. So neither one of us were from the South. So being in the South was a kind of an interesting experience. Now, a lot of actors, I work on accents very differently than most actors. I just kind of like to listen to people and hear how they say it. I mean, there are some good books about if you want to break it down and find out, this is enunciated or this is hit or that kind of thing. And there are a couple of books that I could recommend to people to look at if you want to work on accents. But the main thing about an accent is to listen to it. So what I did to prepare for doing that Southern deputy was I just listened to country music a lot. And I just listened. And I remember later being complimented by Tennesseans about how I didn't do an exaggerated Southern accent, but I really sounded like a Tennessean. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that sense of naturalness. And so during the shooting, and it wasn't a marvelous shoot, it was an incredible thing, although I did pee off the director at one point by doing something, and he cut me out of a couple of scenes in a certain way. He punished me, and then he finally started having to put me in scenes. And I remember him pulling Felton Perry apart. He wouldn't compliment me, but he said, Bruce really pisses me off, but he's doing terrific work, so I'm glad he's in it and whatever. So that was the closest I got to a compliment from him, run through my good buddy Felton Perry. Because I guess I'd said something wrong. I am a pushy person on the set, so maybe I pushed in the wrong direction with that director that time. But Buford was around all the time, kind of officially the advisor on the set. And Buford and I had become really good friends. We had, I remember, we had a kind of a joking kind of relationship with each other. And I remember one time we were on the set, and he said, "You want to drive back to you want me to drive you back to the hotel?" And I said, "Yeah, Buford, great." And I got into his big, fast, red car, and suddenly he's doing 120 miles an hour, going down country roads past little split-off farm roads that can come in from anywhere, and I'm like, "Oh, you son of a bitch, I know why you're doing this." And he's looking over at me, and I'm just pretending it's all okay, And he goes, "Oh, Bruce, I'm sorry. I really can't get much more out of this. I'm going to have this motor looked at." And I'm going, "Yeah, Buford, you do that." I tell you what, I never ever, I got his joke and I put up with it, but I never ever got into a car with him again unless there was a lady present, which he was always very courteous about. He would always make sure that women were being properly treated. He was a real family man and a super, super sweet man, but one of the toughest dudes ever in history. Now, when we did the film, and it was great, you could see there was a great relationship between Joe Don, Felton Perry, and myself playing the main cops. And Joe Don was terrific, but for some reason or other, he wasn't going to do the sequel. I don't know whether he wanted more money or he just didn't want to do it. And Felton, sometime later, explained to me why he didn't want to do it, and I didn't know it. He said that crew members, it wasn't the Southern, it was a shock being in the South anyway, but the Southern guys weren't doing this, but members of the crew would get to his hotel door and knock on the door and use the N-word. "Hey, come on out here, N-word, you N-word," and like there were and he said it was so unpleasant And I didn't know that was on. I said, Belton, why the hell didn't you come and tell me about it? You know, we could have taken care of that, you know. He said, no, I just didn't want to do it. So that's why he didn't want to go back and do the second film, which was one of the lacks of the second film. Well, the second lack was not having Joe Don, and then when they decided that Buford should have a shot at playing himself in the sequel, they decided that he would be auditioned. Now, I remember when we showed the film at the Pantages Theater up in Hollywood here, big, terrific period theater with, you know, and they're a huge seat theater, and I don't know, maybe 3,000 people, and they had people that with deputy sheriffs, so they thought Walking Tall was all about their lives. You know, they were having a major audience response for them. Now, before that, we'd all been at the Brown Derby for dinner, and then we went to the screening with all this huge reaction. And then there was a party afterwards at another restaurant across the street from the Brown Derby on Vine there. And when I came in, the director, the Bing Crosby production president came over to me, sweet man, Chuck, came over and said, Bruce, come on over and meet the other producers. And Joe Woho, who is head of Cinerama Casting, and he introduces me to Joe Woho. I don't remember what the name was, but he was head of Cinerama, and they're going to distribute the film. And, you know, these other 4 or 5 producers, they're all drinking and toasting each other because they had a great success on their hand. And I said, oh, so you just saw the film tonight, and you're going to you're the one that's going to be distributing it. And he said, yeah, and we're very proud. And over on your side over here is Binky, and I turned to my right, and there's this little guy Binky. And he said, and he did all the artwork for the ads that were running about the film, and he's going to see the film tomorrow. I said, oh, so you, Mr. Soho, were going to distribute the film. You just saw it tonight, and Binky here, who did all the artwork for the ads, is going to see it tomorrow. He went, yeah, and I'm like, gentlemen, this is exactly why your film is going to go down the tubes. And these producers are looking at me, and Mr. Distributor are looking at me, and a little Binky went running off into the woods. And I said, you're running an ad that shows Joe Don Baker standing there with a big giant stick thrusting up from his groin like a you-know-what. And behind him, over one shoulder, is a car flying through the air with machine guns shooting out the window. And over his other shoulder are 2 women with their see-through showing their goodies. And at the bottom it says, Story of a Real Man. I said, gentlemen, you are not going to attract the audience that this film should be attracting. This film is going to go into the drive-ins for 2 weeks and disappear, and then down the tubes, and it's gone. And they're like, what? I'm really ruining their party. One of the producers grabs me, pulls me aside, and he said, Bruce, come over and talk to me. And he says, listen, interesting thoughts you have there. He said, would you come and have dinner with me tomorrow, lunch with me tomorrow at the Brown Derby? I said, absolutely. So I went there with him, and then he brought me over to Bing Crosby, and he said, I want you to share all your ideas about advertising the film. And I said, okay. So I basically told them how to redo their poster. The poster would be Joe Don Baker embracing his 2 kids and his wife. The stick would be leaning over against the wall in the corner, and underneath the picture would be, a man must protect his family and his territory, based on a true story. That's the ad that they ran, and it became a big success in Chicago. But like I have predicted, it failed in L.A., so it never did my career any good at that point, or if ever. The film became successful, and there's lots of producers. There were lots of producers and people who took credit for the success of the first Walking Tall, but it was really me. But nobody's going to say that. My big reward was being told I was going to do Buford's screen test with him, and Buford had requested, because he liked me, and I was going to play my deputy sheriff with him for a couple scenes, and then do another hijacker guy, truck driver, in another scene with him. And they had built these giant sets over at Paramount for him to rehearse and shoot. They were going to shoot his screen test. I mean, a big operation. They spent some money on it. And they had one of these old-time Hollywood directors whose basic skill was to be able to say, roll 'em, cut. That would be it. I mean, they were, he wasn't exactly an incredible, insightful person. So he came on, and Buford came on. He said, he was glad to see me. He said, I'm glad to see you. He said, Bruce, I'm scared to death. I said, well, it's a good place to start, Buford. But, and then suddenly the director came over and said, all right, let's read through this. So Buford and I sit down, and we read through the 3 scenes, and Buford is just terrible. And I'm looking at Buford, and Buford's sitting there knowing he was terrible and terrified. And this director, this tack-on director who had come over to say roll him, standing in front of him, and he's wobbling from one foot to the other, going, and he's deflecting his eyes from one direction to the other, and suddenly he whirls on one foot and whirls off, disappearing off into the distance, yelling back over his shoulder, let me know when it's lighted. And he's gone. And so the crew is lighting the first set we're going to be working on, and Buford and I are sitting there alone, and Buford goes like, I was terrible, wasn't I? I said, yep. He says, well, what am I going to do? And then I said to Buford, I said, listen, do you remember when you used to be out on patrol? He said, yeah. I said, well, you'd be driving, and you'd see a car in front of you, and you'd want to check them out, and maybe you'd follow them a little bit, and then call in their license plate number to see if there was anything on it, and then when you decided you wanted to stop them, you'd turn on your lights, and you'd see how they stopped, and then when they stopped, you'd park your car out so you wouldn't get hit by any oncoming traffic, and then you'd walk towards the car, carefully looking at the back windows and looking through the side windows and see if he was alone. You'd try to stand behind him, see if you could see his hand, and then when you got him to get out, you'd look at him, and you'd wash his hands, and you'd make sure, and you'd look at his face and see how he was reacting when you talked to him, and how he talked to you. And he said, yeah, I do all those things. I said, well, that's how you act. He said, oh, okay. And that's what he did, and he was terrific. He was going to be great in the part. So I did, my deputy thing, and then the other thing, and then he just had some on-camera lines left, and I was all dressed up to go and meet my son at a Boy Scout camp. Crispin was in the Boy Scouts there. My wife had driven him up there, and I was going to go meet him up north of where we were. And I said to Buford, you don't need me anymore for this. You're going to be terrific. He said, you're absolutely right, and I appreciate it. And I said, so, I'll see you in Tennessee. He said, yeah, I'll see you. And I reached up and I goosed him, and he jumped up and he yelled at me as I was going out the door, I'm going to get you when you get to Tennessee. And I said, I'm laughing. I said, I'll get you back, Buford. And he left, and we were both laughing as we left, parted company. And I went up to the Boy Scout camp to be with my son, Crispin. And then about, 4 weeks later, Buford was murdered.
Oh.
And it was listed It's still listed as a traffic accident, but his daughter told me the real story. And Duana. And later, when we were filming the second film, and Duana was around, and we chatted, and the real daughter. And she said they had been at a carnival, and Buford had gone first, and they were following in another car. And when they caught up to Buford's car, it was turned over, and there was a tractor trailer at the side of the road with just the tractor part, the front part, and two truckers standing in front of it looking at the turned over car with Buford lying underneath it. It was a convertible. And she ran out of the car and ran to the two truckers and said, "Help me get him out of there." And they went, "Not on your life, lady." And so she crawled under the car herself and dragged Buford, who was huge, out from under the car till she could get him out from under the car. And with his head in her lap, he looked up at her and said her name, "Duana, Duana, Duana," and died. Still tears me up.
Yes, I imagine.
And when she looked around, the truckers weren't there, nor was the truck. But there were skid marks that showed that the truck had forced him off the road. Buford had been a target for years. Whenever he came to town, he would, everyone would be notified. He was allowed to carry a gun, like in L.A. and all of that. But they've been trying for him for a long time, and they finally got him, and nobody ever got blamed for it. I guess the easy way was just to call it a traffic accident. So, unfortunately, the rest of the films were just constant reminders of what it could have been, rather than what they ended up being was, kind of okay. You do your best to be your best in a film, and that's it. It was work and job and money and all of that stuff. But so you move on. There's other films that you're happy to go back, but it will always be a point of grief for me that Buford was still a young man and just had new doors opening up for him, and who knows where else it would have gone, what more might he have done? Because I think with very little coaching from me, he became a really good actor very quickly, which is part of my, theory about good acting. Good actors are there. You just have to keep them from getting ungood by doing a bunch of stuff they shouldn't be doing. So that left brain stuff is the big mistake. What you want to do is have your right brain take over, and art without mistakes means it's not art. Real art demands that you're blundering your way into it and don't know quite what it's going to be. So, like when I saw Diamonds Are Forever, long time after it was released, I at that time I wasn't considered important enough to bring me to the premiere for England, so I saw it months later in Los Angeles, and I saw the role, and I had no idea what it was going to look like until I saw it, and I was appalled and terrified at how creepy a character I'd created.
I don't know whether it was Stephen Joyner that had said this to me, but apparently Sean Connery actually thought you was gay during that film.
Oh yeah, well that's another story, and I should tell it and not let not let somebody else ruin it. When we were filming the first 2 weeks, uh, 2 weeks after filming, Sean just had read the script. He didn't know me, and he didn't know Putter. And he just read the script, and I'm a big joker on sets. Like when Putter and I did our first scene when we had blown up the helicopter and were walking off into the desert sunlight, and I reach over and take his hand, and we walk off holding hand in hand. 5 years later, when they showed it on television, they cut out the hand holding. That was too shocking to show on television. Now, that whole idea of their being gay, which Sean was aware of, is according to the script, we're out in the desert sometime, probably within the first 2.5 weeks of shooting. We were shooting late at night, and it's a scene where we lift him out of a car trunk and put him in a pipe under the ground. And I'm a big joker on set. So, like when I did the thing with the hand holding with Putter, and when the director, Guy Hamilton, said, "All right, cut, that's good," and then I yelled out loud enough for the whole crew to hear, "You're blushing," and that made the whole crew laugh, and Putter was blushing. But that's me making jokes. So sometime later, about 2.5 weeks later, we're out in the desert, late at night. Again, everyone's gone home. It's dark. There's no crew to do stand-in, so I'm holding Sean chest to chest. Putter's got his feet, and we're kind of being lit by the crew, and we're in this position for quite a while so the crew can light it. And I like to play jokes, so I look at Sean thinking I'll make him laugh. So I look at Sean, and I say to him, "I think I'm getting emotionally involved."
Holy cow.
And I thought he'd laugh.
He didn't.
And he didn't get it. And I thought, oh my God, he thinks I'm serious. And I should probably say, "Sean, it was a joke. I'm not gay. I don't want..." But I could see his brain at work, his brain going, "Oh my God, this little poof wants to put his hands on my stuff." And I thought, I should tell him. And then I thought, because there's a certain perversity in me, I thought, what the hell with it? Let him worry. So I never told him. And he, for, I guess, about 4 months, we shot on that film for 6 months. 3 months here, mostly in Vegas. And then in England. And so we're going to shoot a film, a section of the film in Frankfurt at the airport, where Putter Smith and I are sitting behind Sean and Jill St. John in the plane, and Putter compliments Jill. So just before we left for England, we've been shooting, and a Brit on the set said to Putter and I, said, "So I understand you two are going to Germany." I said, "Yeah, we're shooting there the next few days." And he said, "Well, just remember this. When you get to Germany, the Germans have no sense of humor." I said, "Really?" He said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Well, I took a German course once, and the course had translations of German. And they had a picture of Hans standing on platform waving at Fritz, who is on back platform of train. And the train starts up, and Fritz, waving at Hans, hits Franz on face. Ha ha. Fritz says, "That's German humor." I said, "Oh, okay, well, we'll remember that." So Putter and I are in a car being driven by this lovely German airline stewardess with this guy who's German, and they're both very politely speaking English. And she says, "Oh, there was an awful accident on the Autobahn. 6 people was killed. And Putter Smith leans over to me, and he says, was that a joke? It still makes me laugh, and I'm not sure till this day whether Putter was making a joke or thinking it was a joke. Anyway, we get to the airport, and the same beautiful German airline stewardess is there. And when we're in the plane, just for a quick setup, the director says, okay, you can all go outside outside and relax until we do the lighting in the plane. So I got off, and there was this beautiful airline stewardess waving at me, flirting, and she had 2 other beautiful airline stewardesses also flirting. So I went over, and I was flirting with these 3 beautiful women. And suddenly I felt over my left shoulder as if there was the force, just this energy. There wasn't a sound yet, but I could feel this energy actually coming at me from my left. And before I could turn, I could hear, you son of a bitch. And I looked, and there was Sean grinning at me, waving his fingers scoldingly at me, saying again, you son of a bitch. And he said it as he approached us. This was the first time he realized he could tell, by the way I was with these women, that I certainly was not gay. Which, I can remember, like, taking Crispin to a party, going to pick up Crispin at a party one time when he was like, 12, 13. And I looked through the window and I could see him talking to a girl in there, and I went, yeah, my boy is not going to be gay. You could tell. So Sean came over, and he sat on the baggage cart with me and the 3 beautiful German airline stewardesses, and we all of us flirted and flirted and flirted. So from then on, Sean knew that I had been making a joke. Sometime later, then, probably a week later, Crispin was on the set, and all that stuff. Little boy, I would bring him on sets as often as I could. And sometime about 2 years after the film, I knew a stunt guy was going to be working with Sean on something. And I said to the stunt guy, I said, when you see Sean, tell him this, and say it just like this. Tell him, Bruce Glover sends his love. And he did. And I said, did you see Sean and tell him that? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how did he respond? He said, tell that crazy son of a bitch hello from me. So one of the great experiences of my life was working with Sean, and, it was terrific, even though I did put him on for about 4 months. Fun. It's a great business, and we're fortunate that we found our way into it, those of us who are lucky enough to get into it. If any of you find, something that doesn't, certainly doesn't have to be acting, but if you find something you're lucky enough to be in it, appreciate it and really do it, and stay with it, and appreciate what you do. But, if you can acquire property along the line, like I said, start out with graveyard plots. It's they grow in value too, and eventually get enough graveyard plots, and then you can switch it and sell them all and buy a house. But anyway. Now, other films, Hard Times, another great film. Charlie Bronson, Jimmy Coburn, great couple actors, great people to work with.
What about Ghost Town?
Ghost Town. Wait a minute, I have 2 of them. There's Ghost Town and Ghost World. Was Ghost Town the one where I play a blind card dealer?
Actually, I haven't seen it. I just know there's a skeleton in a cowboy outfit on the poster, but I know it's kind of got a cult following.
Yeah. That, because there's another one called Ghost World.
Ghost World had Steve Buscemi in it. Came out in the late 90s.
You were asking about. Ghost Town is one where I actually am a ghost. and I play a blind card dealer.
Okay.
And previous to that film, I had done a film called Hunter's Blood, where I played a character named One Eye. And it was a backwoods character, and that was like a real backwoods character talk. Like, I made up lots of lines for that character. I would do stuff like, hey, you get feed and water, you women. They might last a mite longer. I made up a whole side. These were a bunch of backwoods guys who killed deer and people and ate deer and ate people and captured women and kept them as prisoners and tried to kill this hunting party that had blundered into our territory. And so I played a character named One Eye. And the One Eye character, in order to make him have one eye, they wanted to put a single contact lens in me to make one eye look all white, which was fine. And the person that did it, I think, was a makeup person. She was able to put it in and do it well. And so that was a good part. I improvised lots of stuff. I remember, like, there was a whole section where one of my tribe has been killed by one of the heroes of the film, and they had a great shot set up where my character slid down a slope and then slid past like an overfallen tree, and then would appear below the tree and then crawl towards where the body was of his old partner that was there that had been killed by Sam Bottoms, another dear friend who passed on much too recently. Terrific actor and guy. He had killed this guy that was in my gang, and as I'm crawling towards him, there were no lines in the script, but it was a long shot. And it was a new director, and if I want to improvise stuff, I quite often would improvise things without discussing it. I would just throw it in because I knew it would be good and it would work. And very bold, but I did it with Hyena in the House too, where I improvised a whole bunch of lines for that one. Hyena in the House, I'm playing like a weird next door neighbor. And there was a character in Hyena in the House where I took a character who was supposed to be kind of like an extra villain to Gary Busey. Mm-hmm. And instead I turned him into a comic character. So instead of him being killed, they kept him all the way through the film as a kind of a nerdy good guy in his own weird way. But there was a scene where I was going out to meet the neighbor with her kids and driving away in their car, and a little girl looks out the window and says, "I'm going to kindergarten." And I just improvised the line right on the spot because she was so cute. And I said, "Oh, God, I wish I were back in kindergarten, especially with you." Which made the whole crew and everyone laugh, of course. But they let it stay in the movie because it was funny. But at any rate, this other film, Hunter's Blood, I'm sliding down the slope and I look ahead and I can see Curdy, I think was the character's name, Curdy body lying there, and I went, "You lying down, Curdy, you get up on your get-alongs." Because I'd asked, "Is there any dialogue here?" And they said, "Is there any?" Oh, there was no dialogue. And when they said, "Okay, cameras rolling, shoot, and action," and then I yelled out before, I said, "Is sound rolling?" They said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm going to say stuff." They said, "What are you going to say?" I said, "You'll see." So I improvised all these lines. I said, "What are you doing, Curdy? You fall down? You get up on your get-alongs, boy. I'm going to whomp you. Get up and get going. you're a bad boy. I'm going to hit you and hit you and hit you. And I'm making up all these lines. Then I find the body, and it's obviously his head's blown off. Later on, they did a close-up of the head being blown, unnecessary. But at any rate, then I went on and I'm improvising. Then I'm like, okay, how the hell do I get out of this scene? So finally, I just had my hands on his corpse, and I put my head up in the air, and I started screaming out, wailing out lines, and then they added cuts, and they added that yelling of Sam Bottoms running while hearing my scream. But when the shot was finished, the producer came running up and said, "You just made this into the greatest movie ever." Which made me laugh. Still makes me laugh. Boldness, if you're smart about it, can be very helpful to you. And but it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you have good ideas, find the person to lay them out on, you'll find that you'll get kind of promoted by that kind of stuff. Whatever you're doing, have good ideas about it and do it, Even you guys up there in Canada, come on down to L.A., it's much better down here. No, my mother was originally from, I guess, Winnipeg, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And or is that Manitoba? Whatever.
Winnipeg,
anyway, never been there, but she moved down to Chicago, met my father, and had me. So, and then some other kids and stuff like that. So, being the oldest member of the family, you kind of get taught certain things. During Depression area, the family becomes like a funnel. Being the oldest, I had to be at the top of the funnel, pouring in. My younger siblings were at the bottom of the funnel, sucking in. So, I'd rather be a pourer-inner than a sucker-inner. So, in other words, right back to my accept the disaster as a welcome gift. Do the work, enjoy the work, and never stop doing the work. So I'm always ready to do more, and I've got more ideas. And if somebody's got enough money for one of my scripts, call me. I've got some really good script ideas. One, I would two of them I would star Crispin in, which would be a pretty good asset to any movie. So
absolutely.
If any of you want to, be a producer or a money grabber or a trainee on the set after you bring in the money, I'll train you. I can put together a whole crew and everything. We could film some of it again in the Czech Republic. There's a scary movie I would like to shoot there. What else can I talk about? Let's see.
How about C.C. and Company?
Oh, C.C. and Company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's one that was a lesson plan for me.
Okay.
Joe Namath was going to be the lead of that thing. And Namath was a big famous football star, still is in a sense, great guy. And I got cast as the lead villain in the thing. Now, right after I'd been cast and the salary had been worked out and all that stuff, in walked Joe, and they introduced me to Joe, and Joe was taller than me. And he said, "Excuse me, could we talk?" And he pulled the producers out of the room, and I was left alone. And I came back in. They said, "Joe thinks you're too short to play the villain, so we're going to have to get another guy to play the thing. But you'll still have a part in the film. You just have to make up a part," which I did. But one of the first lessons I got there was buy lifts. Buy a whole bunch of lifts, tall cowboy boots, and things that make you 4 inches taller. I'm a strong, athletic guy, but I'm not that much of a giant. So they got a taller guy who was a good actor. But Joe was great to work with, and it taught me a lesson right there. But I created a character called Captain Midnight. Now, my favorite improvised line there was they had me tattooing a girl's crotch who was part of the gang, and I was tattooing away. It was one of the scenes, and somebody said to me, "What are you tattooing?" And I improvised the line, "This property condemned." That girl hates me to this day. No, I'm sure she thought that was funny, too. We didn't actually tattoo it, so she survived it. You got to have fun, and you got to make people around you have fun if you can. There are people that you'll run into that are mean or just nuts. You know, it is a tough business. There are mean people who will do things mistakenly or just out of stupidity. And some of them do it out of meanness. You know, there are people that like to hurt people, and that can happen in any profession. But survive it. Don't hold on to it. Anytime that anyone hurts you, walk away. You can't do anything but empower them more by remembering it. Never remember. I always forget the names of people who've done me injury. Forget them. It's just, that's why toilets have flush things on them, you know. Flush it. What else you want to hear about?
Well, let me see. Do I have any other films listed here? Warlock on Armageddon, Night of the Scarecrow.
Oh, Night of the Scarecrow. Yeah, that was a terrific director named Jeff Burr. I did several projects with him. Jeff and I will always be friends. I think he's back in L.A. again. I want to work with him again on something. Tom Calloway was a DP on that. Tom directed a film that Jeff, he was also the DP on his own film, but Jeff became the producer on that film. I think I did about 6 different projects with Jeff Burr. American Hero was another one with Timothy Bottoms, you know, Sam's terrific brother.
Mm-hmm.
Another terrific actor. Both of us miss Sam a lot. A few times I've bumped into Tim.
I like Sam in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Sam told me some weird stories about that. He said the great director just popped a pill in his mouth one time for a scene. Said, just take this pill, which made him kind of disorganized. And he said, I didn't act that scene. I was just stoned. I don't know if that director
Francis Ford Coppola
happened, but that's what happened. You know, it's like, okay, be prepared for anything as an actor. You know, Sam wasn't even a member of the Academy until we worked together on Hunter's Blood, and then I said, why aren't you a member? And then I got him nominated into the Academy, and he became an Academy member.
Yeah.
I've been an Academy member since 1971. I'm on the Foreign Language Film Committee, which I enjoy a lot.
Yeah.
You have to see a lot of films. When I first started out, you'd only see maybe 30 films at that. And the committee was maybe only, 25 people. And you kind of had to politic to get on the committee. And I remember when I first got on, I think it was the first year where the Academy was at the new building, which is a great building on Wilshire in Beverly Hills. And it has, but at any rate, the Academy is an amazing place to go to and be a member of if you can. But where was I going with that? I suddenly got distracted myself.
Sam Bottoms and seeing foreign films being part of the Academy.
Oh, yeah, the foreign film thing. The committee is great. I remember when the first time I got on the committee, there were like the 3 German guys came up to me and says, so, you're new to the committee, huh? Are you German? You look German. I went, no, I'm not German. I said, you're going to vote for the German film? I went, probably. So, but the committee has changed now. There are probably, I don't know, 200 people on the committee now. And the films are up to 85 films. So you try to see as many of those as possible. Last year they split the two viewing places for the foreign film to the extra theater over in Hollywood, which is too far a trip for me. I go to the one in Beverly Hills, which is close for me. But it is an experience of learning, and one of the great things about being on a committee like that is, you know, actors are very interesting, and of course when I was on movie sets I would sketch actors a bit, but I was always very interested in the crew. And one of the great things about the committees is you get to talk to other people in the other disciplines, you know, camera, DPs, writers, editors. Editors are so underappreciated not by those who have great editors. Great editors can really save a film that has been pretty mediocre. They're the last rewrite of the film. You know, a film always has to start with a great script. And if it doesn't have a great script, well, everyone does the best they could. The director tries the best. The rewrites they try to do. Actors try to do. Actors sometimes improvise, like guys like me. DPs do great shots. Editors can do incredible editing. But in the long run, it takes a whole bunch. Well, the great thing about being on a committee is you get to talk to these other people and you get their opinions. And that's one of the great things about the Academy Awards. It's the most deserved award of any of the awards. Why? Because everyone who votes on it are actually people who actually work on films. That's not true of like the foreign film of the foreign press awards, the Golden Globes. Not true even of the SAG thing, because a person can be a SAG member who has never really done a role and be a SAG member for years and vote for stuff that hasn't done anything. And they don't have the credentials. The Academy has the most credentialed people working in film. And they vote for an award. It's not that I agree with every award that's done, but sometimes you do. But sometimes you disagree with people whose respect you respect greatly, and they disagree with you entirely. But that's part of the interesting thing about a business where there's so many different disciplines and so many different skills that come together to put a single project together. You know, that's one of the neat things about, I guess, being a painter, too, because I don't depend on anyone else except, the store where I buy my equipment and maybe the person that's smart enough to buy my painting or my etching or my engraving or whatever it is I'm doing. So everyone should keep an eye out for my book because I'm going to be selling them eventually. And you can start looking at, some of my work. I'm going to try to publish some paintings of my dear little sister Sandra, who has got ALS. And
oh, my father's got that right now too.
You what?
My father's got ALS right now too.
Well, there are new medications that supposedly are helpful. I haven't been able to get in any contact with her recently. I had her here for last Thanksgiving. I wanted to bring her again for this Thanksgiving, but she's a terrific artist.
Mm.
And I'm trying to get her daughters to publish her stuff, but I've been so involved with my own business dealings with banks and other things that I've had a hard time spending the time. I'm almost finished with that, so if I haven't been able to find out if she's going to be able to come again one more time, but it is. Is he ambulatory? Is he still able to walk and stuff?
My dad say he still gets around, still drives, and still. Well, he's retired, but he's a workaholic, and he's still active. It's his speech is most affected right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Same with my sister.
Yeah. aside from that, he still gets around. In fact, the doctor said they're kind of surprised that he's getting around as well as he is. But
Right.
yeah, still drives, still active. So
What I hear about my sister, she's still driving and she's still doing artwork.
yeah.
But her sisters, her two daughters, her two daughters are one's in Chicago and the other one's near Chicago. And Sandra, my dear sister, is down in Lower Illinois in a house on a little lake down there. So apparently she's doing shows with her artwork, but she can't talk anymore, so I can't call her on the phone. And the daughters haven't been that communicative, so I don't know what her condition is right now. But it doesn't sound like I'm going to be able to get her down here for Thanksgiving one more time. But
that's too bad.
Who knows? I may go. Crispin's going to be in Detroit. In Brooklyn. So I might. Who knows? We might spend Thanksgiving at his place in Silver Lake here, just Crispin and I. And
here's a question.
That's the weird thing about life. People that you love, disappearing on you.
I think I've had you on here. We're almost 3 hours. You're my longest interview.
Staple my mouth shut, and I'll.
Oh no! You know what? You told some great stories, and I've got no complaints. But I would like to say, do you think Crispin would like to come on the show?
Well, he's pretty busy, and he costs you money. Now, what you can do for me is get people to come to my acting class in L.A., and just tell them to call my phone number, 310.
Oh, don't give your number out in the air, do you?
Yeah, this one's all right because everyone's got it already, and I never answer it, but it takes messages.
Oh, okay. Go ahead if you want.
310-398-2539. I don't answer that phone.
Oh, okay.
It takes messages, and if they leave a message, I will call back.
Okay.
If it doesn't leave a message that means that I want to call back, I don't call back. It's much easier. That number's been dead for me for years now. I can't use it anymore.
Okay.
Other than what I just did.
Okay.
Yeah, the other number that I gave you is I only give to a few special people. So, special people, you.
I'll take being a special people from you. I mean, you worked in Chinatown, so I consider that royalty.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm going to go knight myself right now.
You go knight yourself, and I really wish you luck and wish you well, and I wish your sister well, and I definitely wish Crispin well as well.
Well, just remember the quote: accept the disaster as a welcome gift. Life is a welcome gift, so keep on living, let it all in, and keep on learning. That's what I'm doing every day. So I'll say goodbye and love to all of you. Thanks for listening for God knows how long I've been talking. So later, friends, and later, pal, later.